Thank you, thank you. Happy Mother's Day to everybody. I'm always happy to be with you. Uh, Today's talk is going to be centered around what's going on around us today because it's kind of front and center with everybody's lives one way or another. And I saw a posting on Facebook yesterday that was a little concerning. It says that members of the Flat Earth Society are becoming stressed out and with their concerns over the COVID-19 because they're afraid the social distancing may push people over the edge. So I'm a little concerned for them. The rest of us are a little rounded out, and the reason I chose this title, Mazia, this week is I have been wiping tears away from my eyes for the last 3 months now, almost every day. And not because I've been sad or upset, but because I've been so filled with joy. I've been seeing people rise up and bring out the best of humanity every single day. People going to jobs that have to be done, throwing themselves in harm's way, and people cheering them on, and just it's almost difficult for me to speak now, even thinking about it. The beauty that we've seen. Now, Brene Brown is a professor and author and a student of the human condition. And in a recent publication, she's talking about a thing, and I'm so glad we're Science of Mind because I wouldn't be able to say this in a lot of churches, but she talks about the first effing time we experience something. Those are her words. She actually spells it out. And when we face a new situation, be it the first day of school, a first date, or our very first pandemic, we feel vulnerable. We don't like feeling vulnerable. We like to feel that we're in charge. We like to feel that we have everything under control. And when we face something for the first time, we just don't know what's going to happen. We make plans. I think it was Mike Tyson said, you plan your fight out from the very beginning, and the plan is great until you get punched in the face. And then nothing matters anymore. The military will say no plan survives contact with the enemy. So we feel so vulnerable. How do we deal with this? Brene suggests that there's 3 stages or 3 steps that we can take when we're feeling this vulnerability. Number 1 is to name it. Take a look, figure out, why am I feeling so vulnerable? What's bothering me here? And then the second item would be to get a real perspective on it and maybe take that step back and say, well, what's so upsetting about this? What is my vulnerability? And then number 3 is to really perform a reality check on our expectations. To really take a look at what we're worried about and say, well, what are my expectations here? Are they realistic? Should I expect to walk into a brand new class for the first time and know everything I have to know? Of course not. I'm there to learn something. Are the people going to like me? Maybe they will, maybe they won't. A first date, there's the toughest one of all, isn't it, in the social realm? You finally got up, if you're a guy or if you're the instigator anyway, usually you finally got up the nerve to ask the question, to risk rejection. And you've heard some guys especially will say, well, I just ask them all out. If they turn me down, they turn me down, no big deal. A lot of us don't have that kind of ability to risk that rejection. If you're really solid in your own spiritual growth, yeah, you can probably handle that rejection. And it's amazing how some people that you wouldn't think of as spiritual really have the self-confidence to face rejection over and over and over again. And so in this first pandemic that we're all experiencing together of this nature, let's name it first. What are we afraid of here? What's going on? What fear are we trying to avoid? And basically, the first fear is that we might get sick, or the worst, that someone that we depend on might get sick. Gosh, I mean, there's really nothing worse than having to rely on somebody else to perform a task, or be in a certain place at a certain time, and then suddenly they're just not there, and there's nothing we can do about that. So, what is our perspective then? Well, let's take a step back. Let's look at it realistically. We are not helpless. We're simply not. We can take precautions. We know what they all are now. Wash your hands, wear a mask, stay away. Spirit has empowered us to stay home, to stay out of the line of fire, because the powers that be finally recognized that, yeah, we got to stop this thing in its tracks. Not because we can wipe it out in a single blow, but because we have a system in place to help us deal with all of this, but we can't overpower it. So Spirit even stepped in to help those who must go in harm's way, and provided them with the wherewithal to develop solutions on the fly. We see homemade personal protection is the new cottage industry. People are making their own masks, their own shields. You've seen the plastic shields pop up in all the markets that you are able to go into now. We have the ability to say, okay, this is a challenge. How do we, let's deal with the challenge. Let's not run and hide completely. We can still function. And Spirit has empowered medical experts to speak truth to power, and has empowered local officials to act on their own beliefs, their belief in empirical evidence, to simply say, all right, we were hoping to get some other help from somewhere else, but it's not coming, so guess what? We're going to jump in, we're going to do what we have to do, we're going to call the people we know and make things happen that we know need to happen right now. And we've seen these success stories over and over and over again, and seen the power of the personal conviction of people to just step up and say, I've got to do what's right. And I have that power, that spiritual power coming from within me that allows me to not worry about what somebody else thinks of me, but to simply get in there and do what needs to be done. So our reality check is that doing nothing was certain to overpower our ability to cope. That was the biggest concern at the beginning, was that a lot of people are getting sick all at once and we can only handle so many. There are only so many beds in the hospital. There's only so many respirators and that sort of thing. There's only so many doctors and nurses to go around. They can't handle it all at once. We cannot stop the rain and the rising of rivers, but we can build dams to control the rate of flow, and we can move our homes away from the riverbank. Our spiritual nature provides us with the power of choice. And we look at the evidence, and we chose to shut down our towns and implement physical distancing to slow the rate of the spread of the infection, to slow the flow. We built some dams. We moved our homes away from the shoreline so that we could have a little more room to work with, a little more time to work with. And this is all Spirit working within us, empowering us to face a challenge and come up with solutions and enact them. We slow the spread so that our healthcare system could continue to treat patients and not just process the dead. And for that, we accepted an uncomfortable consequence. Unemployment is at unprecedented heights because of our choice. But put it in perspective. Unlike the Great Depression benchmarks, this employment, or this unemployment, is self-inflicted for health safety. And as the health safety issue becomes less of an issue, we will self-right economically. It will continue to improve. But what about the small businesses that are unable to come back? The reality check on our expectation. There are casualties, yes. And Spirit creates in all conditions. Spirit is taking those casualties and allowing us to grow in different directions. Yes, people have died. People have been traumatized. People have been uprooted with their lives thrown into disarray. And people have risen to heights of love and compassion we often forget we are capable of. I like to watch a lot of the late night shows. I can get up late now, so I stay up late too. And I'm seeing on all of the late night talk shows, they talk to celebrities. All of them are working with charities, and there are so many of them. Charities to help people find food, people to provide shelter, people just to help people pay their next month's rent so that they can continue to stay in place when their jobs do return. They can still be there. This is Spirit working through these wonderful people. And you know, in the new atmosphere of these shows, instead of having the celebrity come out on stage for 5 minutes and talking about their latest project, they're actually going into these wonderful in-depth interviews. And number one, that you see the people in their own homes frequently, and so you kind of see they're kind of like us in a way. Okay, their house cost a little more probably, but it's still. I watched one celebrity the other day, and he had a plastic drawer container in the background that was half open and something was falling out of it. And while he was talking, his wife was going and getting something out of it, like there wasn't a camera on her. And I thought, you know, I've got one of those plastic drawer things in my house too. You know, we're kind of all alike in that way. And we do and think a lot of the same things. And they're in a position financially that even though they're not able to work right now, they can continue to be generous, to throw their name and their resources out there to help people who have less. And they all start their conversations by saying, I am so privileged to be here, and that's why I need to be doing this. And some of us are more privileged in this circumstance than others, but personally I have a essential position outside of the church that allows me to keep working. I don't do as much as I was before, but I'm able to get out of the house, and I'm so thankful for that, because I think I really would go cabin fever crazy if I had to. But you know, we get to see these longer interviews with these people, and we get to know them a little better and realize that, you know, we are more alike than not. And without the hair and makeup crew working for them, without the wardrobe crew working for them, we see which ones, you know, aren't afraid to come on and, you know, sit in front of a camera in a t-shirt and just talk person to person as if you know, they were just here in your own backyard having a conversation with you. And we get so much more substance and so much less flash in these interviews that I'm really enjoying them. And it makes me feel good about people, that I see that those people that we kind of put on a pedestal sometimes are really, you know, they're just like us in so many ways. And they understand, and they're not rising to a point where they say we're better than you. They're saying, no, I'm more privileged than you, and for that reason I have a responsibility to reach out and help everyone around me, and they do so in so many ways. You know, through all this unfolding, we've started rethinking the distribution of food, the system that we've had. If you're listening to any of these conversations with a lot of the famous chefs, they're talking about all the food that used to go to restaurants. They don't have a way to get it into people's homes now. So they're figuring, we got to rethink this. We got to figure out a different way of doing it. And we're looking at how food is processed completely and how that happens. And, you know, a lot of people have been ringing bells and raising flags about these things for a long time. And so now we're getting a situation where, you know, the earth is telling us, hey guys, let's have a closer look. You have the time now. Let's look at these situations, and we can do this in our own life too. What's bothering us? You know, are you in one of those positions where you're sitting at home a good deal of the time? Have you gone through the entire library of Networks films and Netflix films, I should say, and you're running out of things to do? Or you're tired of teaching your kids at home? Well, do you recognize and accept and celebrate your children's teachers more now than you did before? Most people do. It's not an easy job. So we're also learning to use more technology. I've noticed on this service too, and then some of the others that I've had a chance to look into, I think there are more people attending services online than that are able to attend in person sometimes. And I also get to attend services in other parts of the world. I get to see some of my peers in other parts of the country and on at different times. And that gives me a much better perspective all the way around because I get to hear more voices, not just one. And that in itself can be valuable. You can listen to me here right now, and as soon as we're done in a half hour or so, you can flip onto another Facebook channel and listen to somebody else. And maybe somebody you don't agree with. That would be interesting to see how other people are coping. But there are more people attending, and I just think maybe this is kind of the way that we get back, because you know, people that are in the church business, as it were, have been lamenting for a couple of decades now that I've been familiar with it, that attendance has been down. Well, maybe now that we have the chance to rethink how we do things, we can find a way to reintroduce spirituality to people's daily lives. And maybe, just maybe, a consequence of this is highlighting the importance of election consequences, of getting out and doing our part as citizens, as spiritual beings, to ensure that our governments are run by people who are competent to do the things that need to be done, and people who are compassionate and spiritually aware, so that when situations arise that require those abilities, that they actually have them. And we've seen great examples of them. We've seen some state governors and some local mayors who have really stepped up and, you know, really gotten their game on and really performed for their people. And we've seen other leaders that not so much. So maybe this is an invitation to reevaluate our expectations. Is a glass of wine really worth $8? I've often wondered that. Seldom paid it. Is a grocery clerk worth only $8 per hour? The person who's out there on the line risking their life right now so that I can still get my Ritz crackers when I need them. Is it realistic for a business person whose bankroll is less than a month away from evaporation to be driving around in an $80,000 car and living in a $2 or $3 million house? Maybe the business people that are running on very thin margins need to be a little more cognizant of the fact that that margin is thin, and to plan for that contingency. These are choices worth rethinking. Maybe seating on airplanes will return to human standards, and we can sit with a level of comfort that does not resemble a pack of dogs hunkered down for a winter's night's sleep. Maybe rescheduling a flight will no longer double the price of the ticket. Remember when people protested women wearing a hijab? Well, now we're all covering our faces. I was having a conversation with this at Publix the other day with somebody else in line because his child was fidgeting with their mask, and he said, no, you have to keep it on. And I just had to comment. I said, you know, when I worked in supermarkets 50 years ago, somebody walking in the store with a mask was a whole different feeling, you know, and now we expect them to have a mask on. So we shed our tears. Tears for the losses we have endured, but too, how many tears of joy have you shed this week? Have you seen the videos of people dancing with their children, playing balcony concerts in front yard concerts for their neighbors, and just finding 1,000 different ways to say thank you to perfect strangers for whom that thin essential line that keeps the lights on and hope alive. Can you see those examples of humans expressing their spiritual truth and not be moved to tears of joy? There was a time when I was embarrassed to shed tears openly, but since I have awakened to the joy of celebrating and cheering human recognition of their own spiritual truth, I let those tears flow openly. And newly awakened, I see example after example of strong men, strong women doing the same, letting those tears flow because they're joyful tears. And yes, it's okay. Brene Brown, quoting from her in her book Daring Greatly, says, vulnerability is not weakness, and the uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure we face every day are not optional. Our only choice is a question of engagement, our willingness to own the level to which we protect ourselves. Our willingness to own and engage with our vulnerability determines the depth of our courage and the clarity of our purpose. The level to which we protect ourselves from being vulnerable is a measure of our fear and disconnection. A spiritually aware person does not deny fear, but recognizes it as our desire to stay in our comfort zone that empowers fear. Our desire to stay in our comfort zone empowers fear. When we engage with our vulnerability and recognize that Spirit is always pushing the envelope through our experience, always expanding its horizon by inviting us over the edge, fear can become exhilaration. It is why some people like roller coasters and others prefer a book club. Brene writes again, don't take what you have for granted. Celebrate it. Don't apologize for what you have. Be grateful for it and share your gratitude with others. The 16th century metaphysical poet John Donne coined the phrase, no man is an island, by way of expressing we are not alone. We rely on an infrastructure of supply lines and care systems, and every cog in the wheel is vital to the machine's well-being. When we celebrate those we rely on, the nurse walking to work or the mothers in our lives, when we cheer spontaneously and let our tears flow freely, we are expressing our spiritual truth. We are loving unconditionally. We are leaving no room for fear. Maya Angelou was once said, hope and fear cannot occupy the same space at the same time. Invite one to stay. So I thank you and leave you with just one question. Just how do you get out of a Zoom party when everybody knows you got nowhere else to be? Thank you.